Hey, Owen here, and this is my guide to brush painting scale models. Brushes are available in a range of natural and synthetic hairs. I'm going to generalise things to keep it simple. Natural hairs are generally used for oil paint and watercolour paint, and are more expensive depending on the quality of the hair used in the brush. They can be prone to damage and do not work well with acrylic paint because the pH of acrylic paint is the opposite to that of the natural hairs. Synthetic brushes, which I prefer to use, are cheaper and more durable than natural hairs and can be used with oil, watercolour and acrylic paint. Like natural hair, there are different qualities of the synthetic hair. I prefer artists' synthetic brushes from manufacturers such as Royal & Langnickel, Winsor & Newton and ProArt. It's important to have a range of sizes of brushes from very fine to quite wide. For painting models, I find that stiffer bristles are better. You can test your brushes by leaving them in water for a minute, and then if you bend the bristles like so, you can see which bounce back. The left brush and middle brush would be appropriate for watercolour, but only the one on the right would be useful for painting models. Before using your paint, make sure you stir it well for at least 30 seconds. I use a matchstick to do this. This makes sure the paint pigment, binder and liquid is fully mixed. Once it has been stirred, you can check the consistency of the paint. Straight out of the pot, the paint will be too thick and your brush will leave stroke marks when you try and paint with it. You want the paint to be roughly the consistency of milk, as they say. I find that a ratio of 1 part thinner to 6 or 7 parts paint is usually good, although the amount of paint could be reduced if you want it to be thinner or if the paint out of the pot is really thick. Sometimes, for example, I use a 1 part thinner to 4 parts paint ratio. Here I have a 1 part thinner to 1 part paint ratio, and this is very thin and basically a wash. Acrylic paint should be thinned with water or acrylic thinners, and enamel paint should be thinned with enamel thinners or white spirit. Turpentine could also be used, but it is not as refined as white spirit. Enamel paints will get you a better finish than acrylic, as enamels will take longer to dry, so the paint has more time to spread on the surface, and this reduces visible brush strokes. I usually leave enamel paint to dry overnight, so I'm sure that it is dried and cured properly. Before you start, I recommend washing the sprue in warm soapy water with a splash of vinegar, as this removes any residue from the mould that might stop the paint from sticking. I find I never need to use primer, however if you want to use primer then this step can be avoided. Small parts are more easily painted on the sprue, but sometimes I find it's better to cut them off and make little Blu-Tack handles for them so they're easier to hold while I paint them. Always thin your paint to roughly 1 part thinners to 7 parts paint. This makes the paint easier to apply and again reduces visible brush strokes, however it will increase the drying and curing time of the paint. Apply at least 3 to 4 thin coats of paint, never 1 or 2 thicker coats, as the thicker paint will leave brush strokes and possibly cover up detail in the moulding. Use the largest brush you can on the surface, as this will reduce brush strokes. I use a 2 cm wide brush on large areas of my 1/72 scale models, but you may want one even wider for larger scales. Try and brush in all the same direction for each coat, so from the nose of the plane to the tail, or from the top of the tank or ship to the bottom. You can alternate the direction of the brush strokes with each coat to get a more even coverage. When using masking tape, paint away from the masking tape to stop the paint building up against it and leaving a ridge when you remove the tape. I recommend Tamiya masking tape for use on scale models. Painting very small details can be difficult. To make it easier, I secure the model or part in place on the table, then, because I'm right-handed, I rest my left hand palm up on the table. I then rest my right hand in my left hand, so now when I paint I can steady my right hand. This makes painting a lot more accurate and easier. It's very important to look after your brushes. After painting with acrylics, I'll rinse the brush in water to remove as much paint as possible, then gently rub some soap into the bristles and then rinse the brush again. I'll then form the bristles back into a point by either rolling the brush or using my fingers, and leave it to dry upright in a jar. For enamel paints, I'll rinse them in white spirit first and then repeat all the steps I've already mentioned. So I hope you found this video useful and informative. Feel free to check out my other videos on paint types for scale modelers and also 25 tips for scale modelers, to which there are links in the description and in the cards. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.